Just for a second, imagine what it's like to be so sick that the only chance of you living is someone else dying. That is the reality for many people who sit on the organ transplant waiting list. It is the horrifying reality of what it is to live with an extreme chronic illness or disease. It's something I couldn't imagine the horrors of. It must be a very tough existence to have, and anyone out there on that waiting list or has family on the waiting list, I wish you all the very best. And perhaps it's a good time in the video right now to remind you to become an organ donor. Okay, so you're sick, you're dying, and you're waiting. You desperately need this organ so that you can live. But imagine now not being able to receive that organ transplant because you didn't get the appropriate injection. I think we know what I'm talking about here. I won't say it this early in the video because YouTube will get upset. But you don't want to get a certain injection so you don't get the organ that you need to live. Just because you don't get a shot dictated by the government doesn't mean you deserve to die. That is madness. But that is the reality of this Australian woman, Vicky Durdan. This is her story. Aussie mum refused a life-saving heart transplant for not getting a COVID vaccine, unleashes at Dan Andrews. He is the Premier of Victoria, like a governor, if you're not from Australia. Unleashes at Dan Andrews' government for its coercive, that's a quote, jab mandates while the rest of the world moves on. Yes, this is real. This isn't an article from 2 or 3 years ago. This is happening right now. And a lot of people I've seen, I follow some weird people on Twitter. Some people are still upset that there's no lockdowns and stuff, but those people just, I don't know what goes on in their mind, but it's not the normal reality that you or I live in. It's very, very strange. But some people want those things to come back. But the rest of the world has moved on. So why, oh why, would you tell a woman who is dying, who is going to meet her maker, not be able to see her kids ever again, that she can't get a heart transplant because she won't get a particular jab? Like, what? A mum in need of a life-saving heart transplant has lashed out at Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews after being told she must take a COVID vaccine if she wanted the surgery. Melbourne mother of two, Vicky Durdan, said on Monday she'd been turned away by doctors because of vaccine mandates which are enforced by the Victorian government. And they have to be enforced by those doctors or those doctors will lose their license, right? This is... Anyway, I'll go on with the story. I've got the shits now, but I'll carry on in a minute. But does it make any sense as to why she needs this particular jab? So she has to get it because she's under this umbrella of healthcare, okay? She's a patient. Now, doctors and nurses, they have to get it as well because they don't want to pass on the virus to other people and people like older people in hospital, even though the vaccine doesn't actually help with that, which was a conspiracy for a long time, but turns out to be very, very true. So I don't really know why they're mandating it. And other parts of the world are mandating it as well. You can't even get into the United States right now unless you've had 2 of them. But I've had 2, so I could fly there. But I had 2 shots 2 years ago, and they only last for 6 months. Follow the science! But it gets more insane, ladies and gentlemen. This was in Germany, where you can, choose to end your own life. Euthanasia, if you're very, very ill, you can choose to end it like you would put down a dog if they were in a lot of pain, which I think is a great idea. But they mandated that you had to be vaccinated to die. Follow the science! In a world where you should be getting your 5th booster shot, follow the science! There seems to be no changes to these rules, and the mother went on to say that the hospital's stance at the moment is no jab, no heart. Okay, so what is it that we're all thinking here? Let's ask a doctor. Dr. Nick Coatsworth shared his sympathies with the strong woman, that's nice of him to say, before he gives her a big backhand, figuratively, not literally, I hope, but said there was good reason. Surgery patients needed the vaccine. His support for the mandate in this instance was at odds with his previous outspoken opposition to compulsory vaccines in other workplaces. He said, from a transplant physician's point of view, the biggest risk to you is when we hit your immune system like that. If you get COVID-19 without having the vaccine, then there is a significant risk that that organ will die with you. And I understand that. We don't want someone losing an organ. It's a finite resource, right? And someone with organ failure may well be a prime candidate for death from the spicy cough. But what about the side effects of something that I won't mention? Because in this context, it would get the video taken down. What about the side effects like myocarditis and pericarditis, which both affect the muscle of the heart and the lining of the heart, inflammation? Now, wouldn't you think that that potentially would affect someone who is in heart failure? I certainly would, and I don't know a fucking thing. All I know is if that I had a really bad heart, I would be terrified of that shit. And what's crazy, when I was writing this video, like you go and look for that on Google and it just doesn't come up. Even though I've seen this on the CDC, the Center of Disease Control in America's website, who we all run off apparently. I've seen it on their website. I've seen the links. Even though it's not everyone and it's rare, but it does happen. Maybe it happens more when you've got a bad heart to start with. You can't even find that when you Google it. It's crazy. Like everything that pops up is just like, no, everything is fine, everything is fine, everything is fine. The woman suffered heart failure in 2020 before doctors inserted a ventricular assist device, a mechanical pump that circulates blood. That's why she's scared, because she's been through this before. She said that she's up to date with vaccinations for all other diseases, but refused the COVID jab after reading anecdotal evidence of increased heart failure and risk among vaccine recipients. And that's the thing with a lot of these people who are called anti-vaxxers, just because they don't want this particular one, then they're just sort of thrown in the bin with all the other fucking crazy people. I don't know, I don't think that's overly fair. As far as anecdotal evidence, I'm not sure of the other things that she's thinking about, but as far as the heart-related problems, I don't think that's anecdotal anymore. I think that's pretty hard science. She went on to say that she's read up on all the information about it and she wanted to minimize the risk as much as possible because, as you know, heart transplant is not a walk in the park operation. It's very complicated. There's a lot of risks, she said. Now that sounds pretty logical, right? You're not talking to a crazy person. Couldn't you, as the heart transplant doctor, just go, okay, she's pretty spot on with what she's saying here. I can understand where she's coming from. Maybe we're incorrect in our mandates. Dr. Cosworth acknowledged that there was a risk from the COVID vaccine, but described it as very, very small. Sure, it may be small, but it's also there. And she is pretty well researched. Like you would imagine you would probably, look pretty deeply into this if it was affecting you. In terms of treatments, there are therapeutic treatments that are available to treat COVID, should I have COVID, she said. She knows what she's talking about. She's talking about antivirals. This doesn't sound like a crazy anti-vaxxer who thinks they're putting chips under your skin. This sounds like a woman who is fearing for her life and fighting for her life. If she makes one decision, there is a huge risk. If she makes the other decision, there's a huge risk. Can we at least, even if you're super pro-vaccine, and we all should get 12 jabs, can we at least look at this and say, fuck, that is a horrifying decision to have to go through, and she should not die because she goes one way or the other. On that front, here's a question. Do you need your fifth? You know what I'm talking about. Do you? Do you need your fifth? Do you really need your fifth? I don't know, ask your doctor. If you want. If you're an old person, yeah, probably. I'd probably take the fifth. But if you're not, and the science basically suggests that if you get it, it's just as good as getting the vaccine. And if you are young and healthy, then you're probably going to be absolutely fine. So, probs. Actually, no, I changed my mind. I want to keep my job. Get your vaccine, ladies and gentlemen, okay? Do your part, all right? Let's slow the curve of COVID-19. Check out the CDC for more information. Oh yeah. Actually, in Australia here, Carl Stefanovic, who hosts the Today Show, big TV show, he was on air when he had a crack at the fifth, which was very interesting to see it on mainstream TV. And I'm glad that Carl did that in between fighting with former Australian Test captains like Michael Clarke. That was interesting. Carl had this to say.
Adults across the country are today eligible for a fifth COVID booster shot. As you know, I'm not a glowing ambassador for more than 2 shots. I've just decided that I've had COVID a couple of times and I'm done with the vaccines.
So this is the mainstream media saying this now. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens from here on out. Maybe it's a turning of the tide, I don't know. I know they're talking about allowing people into America if they haven't had the 2 and all those type of things. They're starting to happen. But I think the point of this video was give this woman a fucking heart. If she's next on the list, give her one. It's not like it's a liver transplant and she's been abusing alcohol still and she'll just destroy. No, it's a fucking heart. Give her a heart. It's not that complicated. That's the end of the video. Ladies and gentlemen, be a good motherfucker. Peace in the Middle East. My dick stinks. Toodaloo, au revoir. Oh, if you like this t-shirt, the new series of Average Man starts this week. Toodaloo, au revoir. Bye-bye.